Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started and before I introduce your presenters today, just wanted to say if you have any questions as we go through, pop them in the chat. You've all said hi so far, so we all know it works, but pop them in the chat, ask any questions you have for Barry and Ollie, and I will make sure that they're answered live in the session. Without further ado, I will pass over to your host today, Barry Coombs.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you ever so much for joining. I'd like to also welcome now Ollie Resterick, who was joining me today. Ollie is is our lead technical architect here at Cascade around everything Microsoft, not just cloudy. Microsoft Modern Workspace, I should say, Ollie. It's very complex these days, but yes, not everything cloudy, but equally has enough historic past of the legacy to be able to help you on that journey as well. Today we have put together a number of tips. I think there's 7 in total that as you're getting towards the end of the year, we typically find there's maybe a lull and lead up to Christmas, or maybe that's a busy time for you, but maybe between Christmas and the new year, where maybe you or some members of your team have an opportunity to kind of do a bit of housekeeping to make sure everything is tidy and in place, or equally maybe some steps in the new year for you to consider. So Ollie and I have put our heads together with Megan to come up with a number of tips to hopefully help you keep on top of your Microsoft 365 environment. I think Microsoft 365 is increasingly taking a bigger role in businesses. It's more than just email. Teams is relied upon now. You're saving your files typically to SharePoint or OneDrive. It's increasingly becoming a pivotal part of your security infrastructure. But more often than not, it's something that can get left behind, and maybe you don't do those jobs that you should do that often to make sure it's as clean and as tidy as it should be. So if we get started then, and Ollie, if I'll kind of get us going, but maybe if there's any more detail as we go through it, you can expand on it for us. So the first one, and arguably probably one of the most pivotal aspects of Microsoft 365 is Entra ID, previously known as Azure ID, I think, Ollie.
Azure Active Directory. Yeah.
Azure Active Directory, there we go. I told you, you master of all things legacy as well there, Ollie. But from that perspective, obviously the most important piece that handles the authentication into your Microsoft world, as well as the various elements around security. So it's a good time to be reviewing what is going on there. And the first thing here is an area that we find that businesses often struggle with, the joiners and leavers process in organizations, making sure it's as slick as possible. And a good thing to do is remove or disable any accounts that are no longer in use. So have a look or collaborate maybe with HR or finance to make sure that you've got a reliable source of who's in the business. Hopefully payroll is the most reliable service, hopefully not paying people that are no longer are in the business, and maybe just double check that the accounts are there. Ollie, there's always a bit of a strange step that I certainly find in a lot of organizations. When someone leaves, often you might disable an account or change the password because you need it kept around for a while. What are your thoughts about how and when you should actually then be deleting those accounts as opposed to just disabling them?
Yeah, so just to echo your point there, I've always found in other organizations I've worked in, HR have been very good at not paying people when they've left, but not so good at telling IT when they've left. But yeah, to that point, it depends on your policies. It depends really how long you need to keep things. It depends what other backup products you have to be able to go and look at past emails and things like that. If you've got a robust, decent backup solution, or archiving solution, then that should serve the need for looking up historical emails, and you can probably delete sooner than an organization that doesn't have those things. So really it's a horses for courses thing, but typically a month maybe might be quite reasonable.
Looking at that process is important. I believe there's a process inside Microsoft 365 where you can transfer ownership of OneDrive from one user to another user. So if you're worried about what might be in OneDrive, that's an important thing to do. Other areas to probably consider are SharePoint sites that might be owned by that user or teams that might be owned by that user to make sure that they're not orphaned so they can be reallocated or deleted accordingly. Depending on the user, then maybe other things like Power Automate and Power Apps might have to be considered as well. So we're in a world now, depending on what's going on, that there can be a lot associated with a user, and good time for a bit of best practice. As we come on to the second one, then admin accounts, and this is an area that there can be a lot of maturity or a lack of maturity in businesses. No user should be logged in with an admin account. They should probably have an alternative account, and we highly recommend the use of privileged identity management, PIM, which is configurable in Azure ID. From that perspective, that even though you might have an admin account, you don't actually get any rights until you go in and elevate yourself inside of there. And certainly that's the way that we work at Cascade. Ollie, any expansion to PIM? Because it's something that I don't often see used by clients, but something that Microsoft are encouraging people to use more and more.
Yeah, it's a good thing. You need the Entropy 2 licensing to get it, so not everyone's going to have access to this type of thing. But it's really, really useful. It goes in line with the sort of just enough admin and just in time admin principles, where you're not using admin all the time, you're just elevating for the amount of time you need to do that task and then de-elevating as well, which is a really good thing. And the other thing is that here at Cascade, we have a process where when somebody does use their PIM elevations, we've got many consultants and engineers who might elevate themselves in the production tenant at Cascade. We have a process there where Service Desk will reach out to that person and just double check, did you just PIM? What was it for? Etc. to make sure that it's not a malicious use or it's an account takeover scenario.
And accountability and auditing is important with these kind of things. Ollie, could you expand on the next point around admin accounts not being synced from on-prem AD, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of organizations will have an on-premises AD still, and it's very tempting to just take your domain admins group and synchronize that up and make those people global admins in 365. However, we and Microsoft recommend you don't do that, because if your on-prem AD gets compromised, then it's a very easy step if you've done that to compromise your M365 environment as well. So segregation is good. So privileged accounts, so anything that's holding any of the privileged roles, global admin, any of the support admin functions, those types of things, make them cloud-only accounts.
And then we've got interactive login. So we've got shared mailbox noticed here. And you might also have service accounts, things that have been created not for a person, but for some other use case. By default, when you create an account, you have the ability to go to office.com and sign in as that account. Now, that's generally more access than those accounts need. They don't need the ability to actually interactively log in. So what you're able to do is reduce your attack footprint by disabling interactive login. Certainly, if anybody has Cascade support M365, we're able to assist you with this by creating a list of all the accounts that have interactive logging enabled, and then you can go through and have a look into that and potentially save yourself some money with some of your services like Cascade support M365 if you have that. And then the final one on this screen is about reviewing conditional access policies. So conditional access policies are increasingly becoming more and more of a requirement. One, to control security, like where people can log in and where they can log in from, but equally around the control of things like bring your own device. And you might think, well, we don't have a bring your own device policy, but I'd like you to ask yourself, if someone does go to their home PC or their personal mobile phone, what can they do? What can't they do? And both of those questions are really important, and getting it just right gives the users the flexibility whilst the organization can make sure that they have the control that is needed. So Ollie, any point on that conditional access that you want to expand upon?
Yeah, really, that exact point there, really around using the conditional access feature for requiring a compliant device. So that reaches into Intune. So if you haven't implemented Intune, that's a good reason just on its own to do it. But it's a really strong security stance to just put in a conditional access policy that says, if you're going to access our data, you're going to do it from a device that's enrolled in our tenant and compliant, or as a BYOD device, and it's subject to the same sorts of restrictions as well.
So there's a number of points here. If you're looking for the quick wins, because it's coming up to Christmas, guys, we're not going to go and implement conditional access. We're not going to go and implement PIM now. Put those on the list for things to do early next year. But over this period, maybe just do a review of all the accounts. Make sure they're there. Have a look who's got admin access. Do they need admin access? And then write down the next things on your roadmap to be considering to be implementing in the new year. So the next thing is Microsoft Teams usage. So Microsoft Teams is increasingly being used inside organizations, but it can very quickly get out of control. Now, At Cascade, we have a number of different concepts for when a team should be created, whether it's a departmental team, whether it is a team that will be used for something like a project that is transient. It will be needed at some point and then won't be needed in the future. A department team may have all the files being migrated from a file share into it. So it's important that that is persistent. And there might be other types of team that you require inside your organization. But there are tools available in Microsoft 365 that you are able to go and utilize to see what the usage are of those teams. And I also recommend having a look at a tool like Orchestra that would be able to help you maybe put a little bit of life cycle management around it when a team is created and when a team then maybe can be tidied up, deleted or archived from that perspective. Microsoft do have some tools built in to assist with this, but I've found them to be very on and off and not very flexible in terms of what they allow you to do. And that's where a number of our customers have found Orchestra really important. Ollie, do you want to dig into retention policies and access settings inside Teams?
Yeah, so really, in terms of that sort of piggybacks off SharePoint as a storage mechanism underlying. It's really how long do you need to keep that data? Do you have specific policies around keeping data in the underlying SharePoint sites? We have a slide later on about access settings in SharePoint, particularly. But you should review the settings you've got for Teams to make sure you haven't got anonymous people joining your meetings potentially. Which is, I think, came up in, was it the Jaguar Land Rover attack, where you had the attackers just joining Teams meetings, security meetings, just with their anonymous phone numbers, and nobody was questioning it. There was no restrictions to stop people doing it. So yeah, you don't want people rocking up in your Teams meetings just from a phone number without authenticating.
So if you want that quick win, head into the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, go and review the teams in there. It will give you some lightweight usage information. Maybe go and export that into an Excel file. Make sure it's tagged with Purview. We'll come to that a little bit later because you want to make sure it's nice and secure. And then kind of put an action next to each of those things. Need to keep this, need to review this, maybe over Christmas, so you're not going to go and start deleting stuff, but maybe you just need to kind of have that review process in place. And if you go and look at it and you start to get a little bit scared by what you're seeing, it looks like quite a big task, then maybe reach out to your Cascade account manager and ask for a demo of how Orchestra could help you with that process. So the next one, and this is quite relevant, Ollie, we spoke about this in a recent webinar we did around Microsoft 365 security, but it's all around enterprise applications. So inside Enter ID, you will be able to go and see your enterprise applications. These are typically utilized where you, and Ollie will correct me if I'm wrong here, but where you're federating, or federating maybe not the right word, where you're allowing Enter ID to be used as the authentication layer in other applications. So as you can see on this screenshot here, we've got a number of applications like Anywhere 365 or Enforcer. You equally will see things like Adobe or HubSpot or other tools that you'll be utilizing across your organization. Increasingly, we are seeing threat actors using enterprise apps as a way that they gain persistency into a tenant once they've been there, because it's an area that isn't often reviewed. So depending on what your settings are, users may be able to authorize some form of enterprise app themselves without escalation to IT. That's been changed recently, Ollie?
Yeah, last couple of months or so, Microsoft has taken them a long time to do it, but out the box until about 2-3 months ago, maybe. Anyone could consent to a third-party application to access any data that the user could access. So the mailbox, SharePoint, whatever, could have just been copied into a data center the other side of the world where you don't want stuff, or it could be a malicious app, even worse. So that's been tightened down now. So the setting at the moment, if you'd left your tenant by default, regardless of when your tenant was created, now would be for certain permissions and for certain approved publishers to be able to access certain things, which is it's fine generally, but it doesn't. If we're going to use analogies, it'll be horses bolting and stable doors shutting. It's not going to change anything that historically has been approved. So you should still go and have a look through and check every application, check who's been using it, check what permissions have been granted, who granted it, and there's a tab to show whether that consent was done by an admin or done by an end user.
And I believe when we did this recently, there is the ability to disable as well as remove. So probably disable initially, see who then shouts in terms of something that you didn't know was working but is working and it is pivotal to someone's role, and then you can have a process to go through and then maybe go and delete them from that perspective. But certainly
if you delete the app too soon, you're going to lose access to the insights and the logging and access to the information that's going to be useful to work out what's been going on with it. So yeah, if you're in any doubt, just remove the ability for the users to sign in. It's on the properties tab. Users sign in, turn it off, and then go and do some reconnaissance and have a look and see what's going on.
Fantastic. So quick win there. Go and see what apps you've got. If it's well managed, it isn't going to take you time. If it's not well managed, you've just found an area that is a goldmine for you to go and review and increase the security inside your Microsoft 365 environment. There you go, Dan saying disable is better. Definitely in the short term, but then go and make sure you then also do that step to clean up afterwards.
Yeah, you could also have a consent workflow where users can say, actually, I need access to this. The admins will then get notified, and admins can then make a decision whether they want to allow it or not. I would agree in a smaller environment, disable is better. If you're a bigger environment, you might want that granularity.
I think we've recently implemented the consent from our side, so people still have the ability to request, I'd like this, but it's now got to be approved. So the next big thing is Copilot usage. So we see lots of organizations are now seriously looking at AI. It is going to be a big trend for organizations next year and wide and beyond Microsoft 365. We've got a number of different areas looking at the practical implementations of AI and how businesses should be considering it. Define tomorrow. So that's on the 3rd of February. Head over to our events page. I'm sure Megan will put a link up and make sure you're registered for that event. But if you've got some Copilot licenses that maybe some people are using, now is a good time to maybe just have a look at how are those licenses being used and what do you want to do next to kind of consider how people will do it. The next thing that kind of links to this is if you haven't given them a Copilot license, are they using some other AI instead? And we've seen lots of organizations going, gosh, we can't afford to give this to users. And those users are now using ChatGPT and pasting confidential information into it because, hey, I can do my job easier by doing these kind of things. So review who's been assigned the Copilot licenses, look how they are using it and if they are using it. Some real quick wins that if you've given a license to someone, they're not using it, give it to someone else. What you want to be looking for are those champions to find where the time can be saved by utilizing these tools. And equally, who are the people you want to go to share the best practice with the other people you get licenses to. If a user is only using it for the summarization of meetings, then Teams Premium is probably good enough for them. So you can reallocate that license to someone else. There are restrictions with that. It's not as full, the Teams Premium license. It kind of gives you an AI summary at the end of the meeting. It doesn't allow you to then further query it and question it and things like that. But equally, while you're looking at this, maybe consider the wider Copilot chat. So we've seen a lot of organizations recently come to us looking at their AI policies and use cases and worried about things like ChatGPT being used, not realizing as long as the user is signed in with their corporate account, they get the same level of protection as you would do with Copilot for M365. Look for the green shield in the top right. Your data will not go to train the LLM from that perspective, and you have the same level of security whilst it is using GPT-5 and things like that. So you get a very similar level of response to the OpenAI ChatGPT. Anything else on here to be considered on that, Ollie?
Yeah, just on that last point about the Teams Premium option, that'll only work for scheduled meetings. So if you're doing an ad hoc meeting or just calling someone, that's not going to be able to be recapped as such. You need to be actually scheduling the meeting, put it in the calendar, and then the owner of that meeting will get the meeting recap. But it's cheaper than the full Copilot license. So if you're just using that functionality, it may be useful.
I can see a comment in the chat around someone using a third party. I think it's an email management tool. I get about 5 or 6 different ads when I'm scrolling Instagram of an evening around tools that promise to be saving me hours. I think it's a really good point. There's lots of users seeing these adverts, seeing these tools that will be useful to them and simply signing up to them, but they're not really thinking about actually where does my data go? How is this going to change the way that I work? Is there a bias in the AI that is being utilized? I suppose the first thing is how is the user able to sign up to that? It's probably an enterprise app, I'm guessing, that's being implemented for some of these kind of things. And if they had sign off against it, IT probably would have had to authorize that first. But second of all, it's actually, is there a better alternative for users using it that IT can be comfortable with the security and guidelines around it? So really good point there. And I'm seeing it all over the place that shadow AI is probably now more of a problem than shadow IT that we've been speaking about probably for the last 10 years. So the next one is review SharePoint sharing permissions. As SharePoint becomes the data repository inside your organization, hopefully replacing things like your file servers, gone are the days where network shares should be the common standard. We are now moving towards SharePoint. Azure files less so, being the place where files should be stored. And even organizations such as legal and accountancy firms that haven't been able to move away in the past are now able to move away to Microsoft 365 using tools like Intap and things like that. So when we have a look at SharePoint and OneDrive as the main data location, it's important that we consider the security around it. Ollie, do you want to dig into what should be considered here, the permissions, and also the opportunity you might have if you have some Copilot licenses in your tenant?
Absolutely. So this is the default tenant-wide sharing policy you have in SharePoint. And SharePoint, obviously, it controls SharePoint and OneDrive because it's the same underlying technology. So out the box from M365, those two sliders are right the way at the top, meaning that anyone can share files without authenticating. So a sharing link just gets sent, and anyone in possession of that sharing link can get access to the data, read, write, whatever, and have a big party in your documents, and you don't know who they are, which is obviously not ideal. So this is the overall setting. We would recommend normally take it down one notch to new and existing guests, which is where most of our customers probably typically going to be. And that will limit for any SharePoint site and any OneDrive what the maximum can be. So if you do have a use case where you actually need to send unauthenticated sharing links, you might need to take another approach there. So individual OneDrives and individual SharePoint sites can optionally have lower settings on a per site basis. So if you have a need for unauthenticated links, then yeah, your master setting would be the most permissive, and you drop it down one for each of your SharePoint sites. Yeah, and apart from that, the OneDrive setting can be right the way down. So we see that a lot in legal firms where they have a separate document management system. They may choose to actually not allow people to share out of OneDrive, but maybe share out of SharePoint. So those are the sorts of settings we see on that. And in terms of the additional feature you get, so if you have one Copilot license, you get access to a thing called SharePoint Advanced Management, and that gives you some data access governance reports that can let you really drill in to see oversharing. Really, that's the big risk with Copilot. Copilot will base its responses off anything that the user can see. So if the user sees too much stuff that's inappropriate, then Copilot is going to allow access to that sort of thing. So the some of the reports there allow you to see where SharePoint sites have everyone except external users. Maybe the scoping of the permissions is too wide on that SharePoint site, and where you might want to sort of reduce things down, and also the number of external shares and things like that on each SharePoint site. So really useful tools and useful reports.
So certainly some good settings there to look at and review. Anyone that is a Cascade Support M365 user, maybe just reach out to Ollie or Megan, because there is some reports that we can give you that shows who's your biggest sharer of documents inside your organization and things like that in there. So help give you a heads up as to what is being shared from inside your tenant. Equally at Define tomorrow, we have Joy Apple flying over from America, who is going to talk about SharePoint Advanced Management and go through how it can be utilized. But then equally, if you are then an Orchestra user or looking to go and do it, she's going to look at the advanced features that are available from Orchestra. So yeah, thank you, Dan. She was great last year. We had a few technical problems at the beginning of her session, and she did some great virtual tap dancing and filled the gap whilst we sorted the tech issues out. So the next one that goes kind of hand in hand with those document repositories is Purview Information Protection. And to give a little bit of context for those that maybe haven't used it or don't know what it is, back in the day when all of our servers, all of our data were in our server rooms, our firewall used to be the thing that protected everything inside our organization from the baddies that wanted to get in from outside. But as our data is now fragmented across multiple different clouds, multiple different applications, and is now being shared a lot more freely, your firewall is only one piece of the armor that protects you from outside. And one of the areas that we need to be changing to is be protecting the data at source. And that is kind of exactly what Purview Information Protection does for you. And in turn, as part of that is the protection labels. So for those that have this in place, our recommendation is to just go and review your labels and review the statistics that are available that show you which label is being utilized inside your organization. If you find out that your top label is being used 75% of the time or more, you probably need to do a bit of education for the users. And the second bit here is then making sure that you have, and I'm going to pass over to Ollie at this point, the relevant protection policies aligned with these labels. Because if you've only got the labels implemented, it is only a marker that shows what the email, what the document is. What the protection side of it does is then allows you to control what can happen with those documents or the relevant other areas on that basis. So to give you an example here, internal only in our examples does what it says on the tin, like Cuprinol. So from that basis, you cannot forward that email or that document to anyone outside the organization. Confidential, we could then send someone outside the organization, but they would only be able to access it if they are the person that we've allowed access to that document. Ollie, is there anything else around the information protection labels and Purview information protection and the policies that we need to kind of be talking about here?
Yeah, I think just that confidential one. So you'll see on the screenshot that we have there, that's actually Cascade's own set of labels, which we recently rejigged. We had 5 labels before that maybe weren't as intuitive as we'd have liked previously. I think this is now a really decent set there, but the bottom one there, confidential, that's the one we use in the most confidential cases where it's maybe finance information, HR information, and we can't risk that data being passed on to third parties or passed on to other people. So you'll see there's a little padlock on that one. So that's using encryption technology that is baked into all of the Office apps. So this works with any Office file type, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and email as well. Once that's stamped on there, the policies we have will say that the data is going to be encrypted and will only be decodable and be readable by the direct recipients of that email or the people stated in the policy that the users decided who's going to be getting access to it. So that's really strong, decent encryption that's baked into it. So even if the user gets hold of the bits and bytes that make up the file, maybe it's a Word document left on a USB stick, they're not going to be able to access it. Anyone who has got legitimate access of it, they never get to get that data in the clear because we've disabled copy and paste, we've disabled printing, we've disabled forwarding of emails, etc.
So this is a bit of a non-negotiable in terms of minimum security standards that I'm seeing moving forward. And it's an area that many organizations have maybe been putting off. So if you've not got it in place today, make sure it's on your strategy for next year to be considering that. Reach out to your account manager to have a chat with Ollie to understand how you implement it. It's a mixture of making sure the labels are right for you, implementing the right policies, having the right implementation policy to make sure the users are educated. And once you get all those 4 things together, it can work for your organization. It doesn't need to be a nuisance. Get it wrong, it can be a nuisance. Don't implement it, you've got a security weakness. So it is an area that is really important that if you've not already got in place is something that you should be looking to implement. So the next one, and a good one to do on a regular basis, is review your secure score in Microsoft 365. It's a score out of 100 that Microsoft will score you based upon your peers or their recommendations. There are ways to go into it. So it does make some assumptions that you're utilizing the Microsoft security stack to get the number as high as possible. We recommend 60 as a realistic minimum, 70 plus as kind of where we recommend most organizations to get to. But what a lot of people don't realize, you might go, I'm using Mimecast for this and I'm being marked down because I'm not using Defender for Microsoft 365 or something like that. But you can actually go in and you can go, no, I am doing something else to go and do this. You can write some words next to it. And then I think you've just got to make sure that once a year you go back in and acknowledge that you are still doing something to protect you in that space. And that will bring your score up so you can have a realistic view of what's going on without having to buy into the complete Microsoft stack. We do increasingly see many more people buying into more elements in the Microsoft security stack. Typically, it's the top right of the Gartner Magic Quadrant now. More and more people are getting comfortable with it from that perspective. Ollie, anything more on this piece?
I don't think so. I think you said what I was going to say in very eloquent words, and was really good. But yeah, regressions probably. Let's talk about regressions. So when you look in Secure Score, you see a figure in red. A regression obviously is something that you used to get some points for doing, and now for whatever reason you don't. Maybe someone's disabled the policy. Maybe the goalposts have moved on. So yeah, keep an eye on regressions certainly, because yeah, you're losing points there. Something that's gone wrong.
So the next one, and hopefully this is obvious, so test and review your backup policy. Hopefully everybody is backing up their Microsoft 365 environment. If not, I would kind of question why not. Microsoft publicize the shared responsibility model. Microsoft even have their own backup tool that you can purchase now. Many people choose to have a third-party tool with more features, more flexibility, and tools that get their data somewhere else. So hopefully you've got a tool in place. At Cascade Backup, we have a service, Cascade. We have a service, Cascade Backup, that is powered by Druva, that will take a copy of your data to an alternative cloud. It's immutable straight away. It has the ability to have ransomware protection overlaid on it to be able to not only detect ransomware that might be appearing in your SharePoint sites, but allow you to then do recovery across multiple different instances. But now is a good time to confirm, is your backup solution working? When did you last test it? When did you last check that it's backing up everything it needs to be? So good time to review those backup strategies. Remember, the 3-2-1 backup strategy is minimal requirements, 3 copies of your data, at least 2 different mediums with at least 1 copy off-site. Off-site means out of the Microsoft stack in this modern world from my perspective here. So good opportunity to check your backup, or if you don't think you've got the right technology in place, please reach out. So before we kind of wrap this up and go to a summary, one more that I'm just going to throw in, and it depends who your organization is, but we see lots of organizations that have maybe either been through an acquisition or are planning on going through acquisitions moving forward. And one of the things that we see put off is tidying up where those multiple businesses have been in the past. So now is a good time to maybe start thinking about, if you have done an acquisition or you plan to, put in the right plans in place to get one tenant, to get data migrated from all the various different sources into a nice clean Microsoft 365 tenant. Certainly that's something that Ollie is helping people with day in, day out. We've done some very nice projects going from 8 tenants down to 1 tenant over the last few years. More typically it's 1 into 2, but certainly we've got customers at the moment that are looking to bring together 30 plus companies into a tenant, and it's how do you approach that? So if that is something that you've struggled with, or maybe it's even a bit more legacy than that, you have multiple active directories that you need to still sort out. We've done lots of cross-forest migrations and things like that. So a bit of a bonus one to look into now, but as we're talking end of year cleanups, it's probably a good time to talk about it. So in summary, the main points there: review your Entra ID to make sure that you've got disabled users and the admin accounts are right. Have a look into Microsoft Teams usage so you can go and tidy up the teams that you no longer need, and make sure that you've got your retention policy set where relevant. Have a look at your enterprise apps and make sure you've not got any security loopholes in there or things that IT just aren't aware of that need to be secured appropriately. If you're investing in Copilot, then make sure that it's being utilized. What can you learn from the people that are using it, and are there licenses that can be reallocated? Have a look at your SharePoint permissions, because hopefully it's becoming the de facto place where your documents are being stored now. Make sure that they are set appropriately for your organization, and maybe have a look at the advanced management tools if you have Copilot, to have a look at what insights that give you. Have a look at your secure score. Where are you? Are you over 60 as a minimum? Ideally over 70. And where you're using third-party tools, make sure that you go and acknowledge that in the tools to get your score up to where it actually is. And then finally, review and test your backups. Good time of year to make sure that your backups are nice and clean. So hopefully you found that helpful. Ollie, thank you ever so much for your insights as ever. Anyone here that would like to talk their Microsoft 365 or modern workspace with Ollie or one of the team, please reach out to your account manager, Megan, or myself and Ollie. We're more than happily have a chat with you and see how we can help. If you would like to book a strategy workshop, and it is completely complimentary, there's no need to further buy into something else if you don't want to. Just scan the QR code, or Megan will put in the chat the link if you prefer. You can book that session, book it for the new year. Ollie can talk to you about where you are in your journey, what the next steps would be. We'll take into consideration your budget and other projects to give you an ideas about what you should be prioritizing next on your modern workspace journey. Thank you ever so much for joining. I hope you enjoy the festive break. I hope to also see you at Define tomorrow, 3rd of February at Ashton Gate. And yeah, without any further ado, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.